All right. So today we are looking at the Vedic calendar. And I'm calling it the Vedic calendar because they're the original holders and those who utilized the calendar. But this is also, you could call the Tantric calendar. The calculations that we are using in this section are the same for the Vedic, are the same for the Tantric. The Tantric calendar, they might change which day they decide is a festival day, but how they calculate that festival day would be the same. Um, all right. Um, the nature, and I'm just gonna read this little intro here. And just so you know, the material here is a mix. And I actually didn't even look what is in the printed Tantra Loka. I don't think I covered this in depth at all in here. Um, I think I all I did was throw it slightly into the breath. Um, and yeah. All right. So I talked about the year in a slightly different way, which we can do with seasons. Okay. So so this is primarily from Science of Light, Volume 2, and a article I wrote for an online magazine called Sutra Journal, and I've woven them together here. And next week, when we talk about seasons, we'll bring in what Tantra Loka brings to this topic. Um, and you want to have understood the Vedic lunar months when we go into the material, when we jump back into the few verses from Tantra Loka, you want to understand what a lunar month is. And it's literally one little verse that I reference here. So, not a large amount in the actual Tantra Loka, and that small reference, we need to understand all this. And if we're understanding time, we need to understand all this. Okay. So the nature of reality is pulsing. Life is breathing. The heart is beating. The day and night are turning out our experience. Pulsation requires the interplay of two forces, Shiva and Shakti, the mother and the father, the sun and the moon, the creation create the pulsation which is the basis of all manifest existence. The Chinese call this force the yin yang. In Sanskrit it is called Yugmaka, the couple, the pair, or the polarities. The sun and moon are visible representatives of this Yugmaka. They create time that pulses all things. The trees bud, the flowers bloom, and the bees pollinate. Through the movement of the sun and moon, all time cycles come into existence. The Western Gregorian calendar, set in place by the Pope of the Catholic Church, is not based on natural time. So, key thing, and I'm going to repeat this like 10 more times. The Western Gregorian calendar, set in place by the Pope of the Catholic Church, is not based on natural time. The Vedic calendar, used throughout millennia in India, is the mapping of the visible heavenly movement that are observed with astronomy. The Vedic calendar is a pulsating dance of two divine luminaries that create the Luni-Solar calendar. So when I talk about the Yugmaka over here, let's quickly look at, um, do we have it in Tithys here? see. If we go to Tithys, there was this image of, I think it was not down to the bottom. Right here. So this is our Yugmaka concept. The day night, the two sides, the sun moon. So when we say Yugmaka, we're talking about the polarities. And here I'm using the official terminology. But the core concept of Yugmaka is these polarities. All right. So the when we say that today is October 12th, that is a Gregorian date. And the fact that this day of the month is called October, that this month is called October, and that the day in this month is the 12th, was decided by Pope Gregor, and I think it was the second or the third of the Catholic Church. It is not that we looked up in the sky and said that today is the 12th day of some astronomical phenomena called October. It doesn't exist. What today actually is, as we learned last week, today is the sixth day of the waning moon of a particular lunar month. And we're going to learn about that lunar month. And where can we see the lunar month if we go over here to Panchanga? Um, we can see that we are in the month of Ashwina right now. And we can see that the month over here is changing to Kartik right there, right? So in this calendar, we have this possibility. We also have where the month can be changed between Ananta or Purnamanta and Gregorian or Sankranti. So we're focused more on this Ananta and Purnamanta today, and I'll talk about both if we want. So, all right. So Vedic calendrical systems. The three basic astronomical cycles are the day based on the rotation of the Earth on its axis, and we see it as the movement of the sun through the sky. So the sun rising, the sun setting, sun rising, sun setting. That's our first unit, the day. And we've done a lot of work with dividing that day up into AM, PM, uh, post meridian, ante meridian, dividing it up into praharas, dividing it up into kalas, dividing it up into horas, uh, and the different variation of horas. So we've done a lot of work with that and how that exists inside of us. Then we have the month, and the month is based on the revolution of the moon around the earth, creating phases relative to the sun. And so we've done our work with the lunations and understanding the tithys in the lunations. What we want to do now is understand those lunations relative to the year. And so the year is based on the movement of the Earth around the sun, seen as the sun's changing position in the sky against the stars. So we have the day, which is the sun rising and setting. Then we have the month, which is the full moon to new moon, full moon to new moon. And those two units are living inside of the year. And we could say the day lives inside the month lives inside the year. And then the year lives inside of something called a Brihat Samvatsara cycle. And then there's an even bigger cycle that lives inside of that we'll get into here when we do the relativity of time. Um, all right. As the sun rises and sets, it creates the days, the moon waxes and wanes, creating the months. The Earth-Sun cycle creates the year, which is divided into 12 lunations by the moon. In these cycles, uh, in these cycles are harmonics. numerical songs that create a matrix in which consciousness takes embodiment. So our consciousness is being created in these natural harmonics. Why don't we divide, these people who love the decimal system and want everything to be in millimeters and meters and millimeters versus things of that nature? Why aren't we changing the day into 10 hours? Why do we keep it at 12? Why are we keeping the months at 12 and instead of finding a way to make it 10? Because these are a natural harmonic. And we want to understand how is it that this harmonic exists naturally. This right here, day, month, year, I'm just giving the different Sanskrit words that they show up as. Um, Varsha for the year means literally it means rain. And so it literally means the rains. Like, okay, it's the rains are here. The rains are here. Like as a way to track the years. The Ritu Vritti means the turn of the seasons. The Samvatsara, we're going to go into a little bit down here when we do the Brihaspati Samvatsara. But this is a standard name of the year. Abda, standard name of the year. Sharda means another spring. Kind of, kind of another spring has come. It would seem easy to calculate a calendar. You might, without digging in, when we just go to the store and buy a calendar, it's like, oh yeah, anybody can just make some squares and throw that in there. But notice you're using someone else's squares. When we get to the sun, moon, the actual in tune with nature calendar, we get a lot more complexity and so much complexity that there's so much variation. And we see that the entire ancient world used the same basic counter. So it would seem easy to calculate a calendar, but complexity arises because the year is not made of an integral number of days or an integral number of months, meaning we can't just round it to 30. If you notice, our months in the Gregorian calendar, they're 29, 30, or 31, and it's changing. And so, just even in that, we don't have a set only number of days in the month. And our number of weeks are changing in each month, right? Some have a little more, some it's changing in the middle. So it doesn't fit exactly into a rounded up number. And that creates all different kind of issues. The harmonic is deeper, richer, and more complex. Different cultures have used very different calendars and ways of rectifying this. Even in India, throughout the millennia, there have been various systems utilized and various places to start within the cycle. To begin understanding the basics of Vedic timekeeping. And remember, this Vedic timekeeping is also Tantric timekeeping. The Tantrics were born in the world that the Vedic timekeepers were keeping time, and they did not alter that system. The Tantrics just use this same timekeeping system that the Vedics were using, and the Buddhists, for the most part, use this same timekeeping. And when I say for the most part, when you get to the Tibetan Buddhists, they kind of mixed the Vedic timekeeping and the Chinese timekeeping together to get a bit of a mixed system. I don't know if we'll talk about that at all. We'll see how time goes. To begin understanding the basics of Vedic timekeeping, we must understand the calculation of lunar months and solar years. Our goal today is understanding lunar months and solar years and what is called Adhika Masa, additional years, which have within them solar months and lunar years. So follow that. So we have lunar months and solar years, and in and which have within them solar months and lunar years. So we have a lunar month in a solar year, and we have a solar month in a lunar year. And so there's this, again, remember what I talked about at the very beginning? I opened with this concept of Yugmaka, polarities. And one of the things when we use the Vedic slash Tantric calendar is we are having a time cycle that has been created by this sun moon polarity. The solar months are considered hinges. The solar months are the hinges. And so the hinges are what we call sankrantis. The sankrantis meaning the sun changing signs of the zodiac. That's the hinge. On the doors of the lunar months. And so the lunar months, the lunations, are our doors. So we have solar months, which are hinges, and lunar months, which are doors. Um, and this is not my analogy. I'm using a very traditional analogy here. What is a door? What is a door without hinges, or hinges without a door? The sun and moon work together to create a luni-solar calendar that integrates the male and female Shiva and Shakti, Prakasha Vishrama, or the pumping and resting of the heartbeat. So, in the beginning of the year, we went a lot into this pulsation, and this Vedic tantric calendar is is created by this pulsation. Now, can we say that Pope Gregor's calendar is created by this pulsation? We can say that he took the model of a calendar that was created by the pulsation and he used some of the numerology to create his calendar. It no longer correlates to that pulsation in the sky. Just to differentiate, to show how they relate and how they differ. The lunar cycle divides the year into 12 harmonics. So the lunar cycle divides the day into 12 harmonics. And there are, when you start looking into lunar cycles, there are these people out there who are like, there's 13 moons, there's 13 moons. And we're going to learn that no, there's not. There's 12.3 moons per solar cycle. 12.3. And that 12.3 sometimes becomes 13, but there's not a regular 13. So the standard is there's 12. The lunar cycle divides naturally into this 12, which we could call 12.3. The year then resonates to this harmonic of 12 and divides itself into 12 solar months. So we have 12 months in the year because there's 12.3 lunations in a year. There's and we did our work with lunations when we did our tithys. So these 12.3 lunations give us 12 solar months. Like 12 dancers, they move together. Time and its units are not man-made. They are man-observed. The divisions of time are divine harmonics that are recognized by the ancients. So the ancients watched this for millennia, and they came up with these calculations. And the calculations that we're about to study were so it's like, when somebody invented the cell phone, it spread through the whole planet because everybody was like, this is the most incredible technology. Oh my gosh, I can dial in this thing and call anybody anywhere on the planet. And so it spread all over. And so in a similar way, this math of calculating the sky spread, and can we say it was India or Sumeria that created this? We know that it existed in Egypt, Sumeria, India, and also some in China. Our exact timing in China, I'm not an expert on. And there was a cross fertilization through those cultures. Um, Devin, you got the Hellenistic background. When this cycle was being developed, There was no such thing as Hellenistic. We're 2 to 4 thousand years before the concept of Greece being a civilized culture even was a blip in consciousness. So we're talking about Egypt, Sumeria, and notice I'm saying Sumeria. I'm not saying Babylonia even. And in India, we're talking about Mohenjo-daro and the Harappan culture. And in India, we're talking about I think they call it the Yellow River culture. And so these cultures were developing and integrating the mathematic that created this. And occasionally you have people that want to name, oh, these guys. And it's kind of like, I'm sure somebody in one place developed the technology for wireless communication. And then someone else developed a microchip that made that smaller. And then somewhere else on the planet, somebody developed some other component that allowed that cell phone to develop more and more and integrate. And so in the ancient world, to me, to say, oh, this person developed it, we're talking about thousands of years between cultures that are trading back and forth and sending their wise advisors to the foreign kings and with saying, oh, if you marry my daughter, then I will give you the science of how to calculate this and this and this. And so we get this interchange going back and forth. And we see and I think it was actually Germany that we discovered the oldest calendar in Europe. And it's called and don't quote me here, Nebera. Somebody maybe can put it in the chat. Nebera sky disk is our oldest form of them using this calendar. And so we can see that even ancient Europe, they were using this calendar. In India, they were using it. The Sumerians were using it. The Egyptians were using a variation. And when I say a variation, the Egyptian culture used um, uh, many different calendars over their long history. Let's see. And Matt threw it in the chat, and I'm going to. So this is our 18 to 1600 BC sky disk, and how in the heck this works? There's certain stars there. This is showing phases of the moon. These notches are each noting different phases. Anybody who wants to see the European correlate to this can dig in here and see the European roots that go with this system. All right. Divisions of time are divine harmonics that were recognized by the ancients. So our first thing is to understand the synodic month, and we already understood that, but we're going to just dig slightly deeper into the numbers here. Um, the sun gains 1 degree per day. We learn that with our tithys, while the moon gains 13 degrees per day. They are both moving. The more rapidly moving moon is chasing the slower and more steadily moving sun. The synodic month is the period in which the moon gains one complete revolution over the apparent or visible motion of the sun. So the synodic month is the period in which the moon gains one complete revolution over the apparent or visible, or 360 degrees over the sun, not just moving 360 degrees in the zodiac. The moment of the new moon, Amavasya, is the moment I should say, the moment of the new moon conjunction is the moment when the sun and moon have the same longitude. When the sun and moon have the same longitude, they enter a union, Sangata, known as syzygy, or the new moon conjunction. And that's a link to my article on the new moon conjunction and terminology there. From the time from one new moon to the next new moon conjunction is approximately 29.5 days. So 29.5. So if I have 12, 29.5 times 12 gives us, let's see, I'll pull up a calculator here. We can all pull up a calculator and do the math. 29.5 times 12 gives us 354 days. And I should have known that number off the top of my head. That's standard number, 354. And that's repeated through various scriptures throughout the world. Julie, it's discussed in the Christian tradition in the Book of Enoch, that this numerology and these calculations. Um, if we take that 29.5 and we times it to the 13, that, some people say 13 moons, it gives us 383 days. And we know there's not 383 days in the year, right? So how can there be 13 moons if, there's not 383 days? So we have 354 days, which isn't 365, and we have 383 days, which is not 365. Um, all right. Where are we here? So, 29.5 days. According to Surya Siddhanta, it is, and so this 29.5, just to know, it's rounded. If Surya Siddhanta, it gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Surya Siddhanta is giving us 9 decimal places. And and just to be really clear, this is something like 1800, 16 to 1800 years ago. They're giving us 9 decimal places. This is a level of precision that required high level observation. Okay. According to Surya Siddhanta, this new moon to new moon conjunction is 29.53, right? Modern calculation takes it, let's see, the 53058. You can see it's the same modern calculation. Here it's becoming 8. This is 7-9, right? So very much right on what NASA is calculating. And that slight difference is not just NASA versus the ancient astronomers, but there is a slight variation that is happening throughout the years. Every few hundred years, we're gaining like 15 seconds or losing 15 seconds. I can't remember which way. There's a 15-second variation that is happening. So, um, and if you think that 15-second variation, it's creating a slight different harmonic on Earth. So our evolution is being altered by this slowly altering moon time revolution, and hence the evolution of what humans and animals and everything like that will be altered. The ancient Vedic astronomers um, uh, calculated the length of the lunation to 9 decimal places to ensure precision of calculations over thousands of years. The modern and Vedic difference would amount to a variation of about 1 hour and 11 minutes in 5,000 years. So and just to be really clear, this is it's unless you were calculating it yourself, you don't get the incredibleness of the precision of them getting this conjunction detail. But this took centuries of observation to be able to come up with. Centuries. All right, and we can see this motion: full moon, new moon, full moon, new moon. And we're talking about this lunation, this new moon to new moon. The mean new moon occurs and so this is mean. Mean means we're averaging. The mean new moon occurs every 29.5, and we get this slight different variation because we're doing this average, which is 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 3 seconds. Get that when they're doing this detail here, they're talking about the seconds from new moon conjunction to new moon conjunction. And this is, 2000 years ago, right? But the actual new moon does not recur at exactly this interval. The mean motion is the average motion, which is a constant, while the actual or true motion is what actually is happening and has fluctuations. The moon may be fast or slow according to its elliptical motion at the time of becoming new, and this anomaly needs to be taken into consideration. Now, where did we study anomaly? We studied anomaly when we were doing our eclipses because this anomaly makes a big difference of how long an eclipse lasts and every where we are in that ellipse. Are we close or farther away? um, and so the anomaly is giving us this variation. Now just get that this mean motion is the average. So this new moon to new moon is a different time every month. They had to do not the calculation of 1 month accurately. They needed to do the calculation of 19 years of full moons and then average that to perfection, which means they did a 19-year cycle, a 19-year cycle, a 19-year cycle, a 19-year cycle, and then averaged that together. So huge amount of observation required to get this data in the ancient world. The anomaly is based upon the anomalistic month, which is 27.5546 days, according to Surya Siddhanta. Might be slightly different towards with NASA at this moment, where the moon will repeat its pace according to its position. The Siddhanta's pace, meaning the speed goes back and it repeats in the cycle. The Siddhantas give charts of the moon's anomaly for precise calculation of the exact moment of the new moon conjunction. In 1600 AD, the Vedic astronomer Ganesh Devagya added a correction, raising the annual increase of the moon's anomaly 2 seconds and decreasing the length of the anomalistic month from, and we can see these dates here. I'm not going to try and read them all, but Ganesha Devagya in the 1600s. The precision is needed to calculate the new moon, which also needs to take into account the anomaly of the sun's pace, the Earth's elliptical motion around the sun. Now, at this moment in time, we look at Surya Siddhanta in these texts and we're like, oh my gosh, NASA's got so much on these guys. These guys, NASA can do such more detail. Just to be clear, when the Portuguese landed in Goa in the late 1400s, when they saw Surya Siddhanta in these other texts, they were just, I don't know what the right word is. They were just like, wow, foaming. They took it back to Europe. It was like, look at these calculations. Look at this precision. Oh my goodness. So these calculations, after the Portuguese came to India through, and just to get the Europe before the Portuguese landed in Goa, had to mediate everything through the Muslims and Arabs, Arab Muslims. Everything had to go through them. And so there was almost like this doorway of blocking of knowledge and resources. And it was only what they felt like sharing. Once the Portuguese landed, they're like, look at all these books, look at all this math. And not only was it the astronomical books that they were amazed with, but the mathematics they were amazed with. They were just wow. There's a few books that I've read that talk about the different scholars who were like, wow, look at this book, and we have record of their discussions discussing what they when it came back from Europe, how those numbers changed and the science that evolved from it. One of the things that is slightly disappointing is a lot of those mathematicians and things of that nature, they didn't reference where they got a lot of their new understandings from, but we know what they had before the late 1400s, and we know what they had after. And so you can see what they got, and they discuss sometimes what they got. But Surya Siddhanta, and and the amazing thing is they took this and they ran with it. And now we have NASA. And even before NASA, in the late 1800s, where Europe had taken the astronomical science is just amazing. With metallurgy and everything of that nature, their ability to make instruments with precision was just amazing. All right. Just a little history lesson in here, right? Everybody okay with the history lesson? Okay. Um, and we get the history lesson because these are historical of moments of understanding the sky. Um, the moment of the new moon conjunction marks the beginning of the lunar month and the end of the previous month. So and this is for the majority of calendars. The new moon conjunction is marking the beginning of the next lunar month. The calculation is called a monta when we calculate from this new moon conjunction to new moon conjunction, which is used in most places in India today. And I say most, there's a little resurgence of people trying to use the Purnamanta, the full moon to full moon these days. Um, but the government of India officially is utilizing the new moon conjunction to new moon conjunction. The Rig Veda talks about the sun and moon cycles and says that the moon, as she invigorates herself after having been drunk by the gods, gives shape to the months. The moon wanes, having her light drunk by the gods, and then after the new moon conjunction, which starts the new lunar month, grows in light again. What does this remind us of? So, a lot of times people say that this moon decreasing in light, being drunken away by, is a later myth. We can see that this exists in the Rig Veda, and it went from the Rig Veda into the Puranas and the Tantras. So we can see that it's a source concept existing in the Rig Veda. All right, and so our months that are new moon conjunction to new moon conjunction are called amanta, and our months that are full moon conjunction to full moon conjunction are called purnamanta. And we can see over here that TJ in Devaguru gives us an option. And notice the default is amanta, and we can also, which that puts us in Ashwina here, and this next moon putting us in Kartik. And we can see that we also have the ability to Vishnu Purnamanta. And let's see when it refreshes. And because this is more of a Vaishnava used tradition to do full moon, the full moon, I have TJ putting the Vaishnava names of the months over here for that calculation. And so, Parm Guruji wanted the Vaishnava calculations in here. And we can see the Hrishikesha going. Okay. And so it goes from Hrishikesha to Padmanabha. And these are month names. So this is Hrishikesha Shukla Navami. Padmanabha Krishna Pratipad, right? This is our what this is indicating here in the calendar. Um, all right. And so, and I'm going to take it back to Ananta for all our purposes. Um, all right. So the Purnamanta and Amanta. Solar year. So we have we have to understand the solar year and our lunations in the solar year. The solar year, and if just so we're in context, right now we just focused on the synodic month, the lunation. The lunation is called the synodic month. It means new moon to new moon or full moon to full moon. We are not for the calendar looking at the moon at the sidereal lunar month, meaning the moon from Aries 0 degrees to the moon 0 Aries degrees. We are going all the way past um, uh, from one to the other. And let's see, I'm going to, let's see if I can remember where that one image is. Oh, there's a diagram I use for this to explain this. I'm gonna give me a second. I'll pull it up. Wasn't the plan, but now that I'm saying it, it'll be a nice teaching aid. Um, let's see. And mm, getting close. And I'm in the right file. Oh my goodness, so many links to get to the. I know it has to download this folder real fast. And we just want to make sure that we're understanding this difference between, and it looks, oh, right, there we go. And I'm gonna change image to share. All right. So we have this image here. Um, And we can see if this was the moon at 0 degrees Aries, and the moon can be at any degree on its full moon. But if we look at this 0 degrees Aries, and then the moon starts moving, it's Krishna. This is from full moon, it goes down to it's 1 Tithi, 2 Tithi, 3 Tithi, 4 Tithi. You can see the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we get all the way down. This is our 15th Tithi. This is our Amavasya. And then we start waxing. And we're Tithi up. And as the Tithi goes upwards, 11th Tithi, 12th Tithi, 13th Tithi, 14th Tithi. And then as we get to this 15th Tithi of the next Purnima, the moon has moved all the way over here, 30 degrees almost. Okay, so for the one full moon, even it might be 0 degrees Aries, but our next full moon is going to be somewhere around the beginning of Taurus. It's going to have changed something of that nature, right? So in our sidereal, sidereal month, the moon moves from 0 Aries all the way around the zodiac to back to 0 Aries. And that's where we get our nakshatras that we studied last week, right? So that's the motion. So the nakshatras are a sidereal lunar cycle. The Tithys are a synodic lunar cycle, and they are moving through the zodiac. And this is a bigger uh, mandala. We can see that in this moon, the first, if we have an Aries full moon, the next one is going to be a Taurus full moon. The next one is going to be over here a Gemini full moon. So each full moon will be in a different sign. And so we're getting 12 different places that the moon will be throughout the year in this. Everybody with me on the synodic, right? And so now we looked at this is a synodic lunar month. What we want to look at is the sun moving through here. And for the sun, do we care about the sun going 0 degrees Aries to 0 degrees Aries? Or do we care about the sun going from the equinox, spring equinox, to spring equinox? Um, let's see, back to here. Great. All right. So our synodic month is everybody glad I got that diagram? Helps put it in a little bit more. Okay. Um, so the synodic month, it's moving through the zodiac of where the moon becomes full. It's it's changing. Where the sidereal is our nakshatras, our synodic is our lunations that are moving. Now, when we go and we take the sun in this same place, the solar year is based on the 365-day motion. So we know that the year is 365 days, right? Everybody knows that? Where's the hard thing in that calculation, huh? Where's the hard thing? If only. Um, Through the zodiac, the solar year is based through the zodiac as perceived from Earth, which, and I say as perceived from Earth because we perceive it as the sun moving, but it's actually us moving, right? Um, there are two types of solar year, tropical and sidereal. I bolded them to make it easier to see. It is this difference between these two types of years that create the variation between the stars and the seasons, which we call the Ayanamsha. The tropical year, and the tropical year means from the exact spring equinox to the next exact spring equinox is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45.2 seconds every year, right? While the sidereal, meaning from 0 degrees Aries to 0 degrees Aries, is 365 days, same there, right? 6 hours. Ooh, this one is 5 hours, 48 minutes. This one is 6 hours and 9 minutes and 9.8 seconds. So we're getting just a slight difference. How much of a difference? The difference between the tropical, seasonal, and sidereal stellar year is about 20 minutes. These 20 minutes are creating an ayanamsha, meaning that they're creating a difference between the stars and the equinoxes. And every year there's a 20-minute difference, which is making it so that those who use a tropical zodiac, the tropical zodiac doesn't actually correlate to the stars because it's not calculating this movement, where a sidereal zodiac is calculating this movement here. The difference between the tropical and seasonal, let's see. Do we want to talk? I'm going to bring in, let me see, another picture, I think. Um, let's see if the picture's handy. Which of these do I show? So referring to this difference here, and some of you already know this, some of you just can't wait to hear it again. Um, uh, we have, we can see it 2600 BCE. The spring equinox would have fallen right here in Taurus, about 10 degrees of Taurus. That is 2600 BCE. And why am I using 2600 BCE? This is generally when the Rig Veda was being used in the poetry in the Rig Veda, and they often talk about the spring equinox and this red star, which is the bull, the eye of the bull. And so we can see that they're referring to this, that the red eye of Aldebaran rising at the spring equinox. Um, we can see around 290 of the common era. We get the using the Lahiri calculations of the stars, we get the equinox being exactly at 0 degrees Aries. And because Ptolemy and a lot of the Hellenistic texts were written at this time, they just keep this zodiac as 0 degrees Aries is this time of year. And just to be this time of year, this is spring, the spring equinox. So at the spring equinox, it started Aries. That was in 290 CE. But this 20-minute difference ends up adding up to be an entire degree every 72 years. And if it's a degree every 72 years, what we have since 290 CE, in the year 2000, we had 6 degrees of Pisces was the equinox. And so this equinox is happening in 6 degrees Pisces. So the sidereal year is we're going Aries to Aries. This 0 degrees Aries to 0 degrees Aries. The tropical year is this equinox to this equinox. Everybody got the difference. And you can see how that time variation is making them move, right? And so this is our time period right here. And we'll probably visit this again next week when we do the year and the season calculations. All right, great. That help everybody get this tropical sidereal slight difference in their minds? Not as much as the Tithy one did, huh? Okay. Um, So this tropical year from the equinox to equinox is, we saw how long it was. Okay, we did that one. The tropical year is a period of time from one vernal equinox to the next, which is according to modern calculation, and we can see that number of days. The utility of the tropical solar year is for starting the seasons at the same time every year. The Gregorian calendar is presently based upon the sun's motion only, and therefore utilizes the tropical year. So the Gregorian calendar is using the tropical year. And um, do the Vedics just not use the tropical year? No, they do use the tropical year, but they don't call them based on the names of the stars because the stars are moving. They have tropical month names. And so we see that here, that if we go back to, and this one I didn't put it, I guess I only have it in this chart, but this Madhava, Shukra, Suchi, this is based upon the equinox. So this is a seasonal month. If I say Aries, Pisces, Taurus, that's a sidereal month. And so we differentiate them. In the Western astrological system, they are not differentiating them. Um, yes, Audrey. Should I stay on that chart for your question?
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, so I just want I'm just still after a few years
Yeah.
stuck here. Most of the people who come to me for a reading are pretty well versed in their chart in the tropical system. And it's very important for us to have a discussion about how we are going to conceptualize like this is just a different system. They both work. But I'm like internally, I'm like, why does that one work? If you're saying that you're an Aries and that's based on the like Aries is a Mars sign and like all the specifics of Aries, but It's actually not. Like, does it just work because like there's so much collective consciousness giving it that power? Or like why? I
Um,
just thought I'd be honest about where I am with that and see.
fully. And one of the things you want to um, notice is it was a slow drift, and in that slow drift, the they took certain preference of certain techniques over other techniques. Notice how much Western astrology puts into transits compared to how much we put in the transits. They are so into transits because there's no difference between transits in the two systems. If the moon at birth was right here in transit, whether it's the season or the star, a transit will be in the same place. How I use wording to differentiate for those clients. And what I say is, hey, you might think because where this says Madhu, they call Madhu Aries. They call Madhava Taurus. And so what I'd say is because they're calling Madhu Taurus, I say that's the sign of Taurus. I say I'm using the constellation of stars of Pisces. So if they think their moon is in Aries, I say your moon is in the sign of Aries, but it's in the constellation of Pisces.
But isn't the interpretation of what that could possibly mean totally different?
So as and as I said, if you notice over time, because this shifted slowly over time, they also shifted techniques slowly over time and put preference to certain techniques. And the Vedic also puts preference to certain techniques. And we aren't using, even though a lot of the texts have similar techniques, we aren't using those the same techniques. And so they are using what the Western system, tropical system calls Aries. They're actually saying your sun is in Madhu. And it really is in Madhu. They're calling Madhu Aries. But for us, Madhu is not the stars of Aries. It's the time of year of Madhu. And so it's really a nomenclature difference. Um, and Devin saying I've been conceptualized that everything is one first, then the energy is coming from the constellations, but the tropical zodiac is when it's landing. The big thing that we over here, like if I look at this Leo, for us, we have something, there's the star Regulus. The star Regulus right here is 5 degrees of Leo. Now, in the Western, that is, if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this Regulus is falling over here in basically Virgo. This is the heart of the lion. How's the heart of the lion falling in Virgo? So what the Western system does is they use these solar tropical months and then they use fixed stars. They use this star from Leo. They use where's and is the different stars from Virgo and Libra and Scorpio. They use the Antares, right? That's Antares right there from Scorpio. So they're using fixed stars. And Devin just wrote for us at least Antares is 10 degrees Sag, but it's the heart of the Scorpion. So they end up using these fixed stars and projecting them into these tropical months. And the big thing is just to get that when they say Aries, they actually mean Madhu in our system. When they say, what do we have here? 6, 7, 8, 9. When they say Scorpio, they actually mean Sahas in our tradition. So they're using this inner circle with fixed stars. We're just using this external circle. And either way you look at it, they both work, but they're showing different things. And if you really break down the systems, they will see different things. And if you notice when you talk to a Western, somebody who knows their Western chart, what's the first thing they say? I'm a
Sun sign.
I'm a sun sign. And these months right here are based on your sun. Where what do we care about? The first thing we care about is which star is rising and which star is your moon next to. So notice, like when we even walk up to the zodiac and we see the stars of a person in it, the Vedic astrologer says, what star is rising? What star is your moon next to?
Yeah, I talk about that with people, and I think it that really lands about the difference in like kind of where the consciousness is coming from.
Where for them, they say, where's my sun? Because literally they're not looking at the stars. They're looking at what season they were born in. These are seasonal months. All right, don't want to spend too much more time here. Um, let's, all right. So, because all that's solar, and I guess we are studying solar year, right? So it fit for solar, but we're gonna go into that next week. Um, all right. So then so we have our tropical, which was that inner cycle, right? Of from equinox to equinox. And it's very important because this shows us when to plant our food. When is it going to rain? When is it going to get cold? Um, this is what the tropical tells us. The sidereal is the period wherein the sun passes through all 12 signs and returns to 0 degrees Aries. The length of the solar year, according to Surya Siddhanta, and it gives us the data that we set up there. Then we have the anomalistic year, which we looked at last when we were studying eclipses. And these 3 years are all used to calculate eclipses properly. So now we go into the interaction of solar and lunar months. And I get really detailed here. Hopefully we don't get too lost in the details, but I'm going to go through them. So Sankranti. Sankranti is where the sun goes from one sign to the next. Is the time when the sun enters a new sign and is within its 0 degrees placement there. As the sidereal solar year begins with Mesha Sankranti. So the sidereal year begins when the sun goes into Aries, sidereal Aries. Um, and if we look just as far as Sankranti goes, this coming Friday, the sun will go into Libra at 0044. So 44 minutes after midnight, the sun will go into Libra. So this is an exact moment. This is also the first solar month in Aries. The solar month is based upon the motion of the sun through each of the signs and is related to the energy of the sun. The second month begins at 0 Taurus, which is called Vrishabha Sankranti. As the sun's velocity varies, a solar month will have either 29, 30, or 31 days. So this is the reason that some months have 29 or 30 or 31 days in the Gregorian calendar. It originally correlated to the motion of the sun through the signs. The Gregorian calendar no longer does that. When we go over here to the Panchanga, and let's see. And so I'm going to change this. This says October. I'm going to change this from Gregorian into Sankranti, which is my personal preference. And so we can see that this starts, let's see, Sun went into Virgo, at 12:46. So this sidereal month that we're in now started September 16th in the sidereal stars. So, and at 12:46, and this is a 24 hour, so it would have been 12:46 in the afternoon. This happened. And notice I'm mentioning this happening at 12:46 in the afternoon. The other one was 44 seconds after midnight. This matters to us. The fact that the sun is not changing at sunrise exactly. It can change at any time of the day. And this is where we get this rounding up situation. But that to the next change, it could be 29, 30, or 31 days, depending on where the sun is. I should say where the Earth is in the ellipse going around the sun. And are we moving faster or are we moving slower? Which cycle we are in there. So let's see. And these are footnotes that I removed from being footnotes and just made as like in text reading to make the online reading easier. And I'm just going to read through them relatively quickly. Hopefully, I don't get too into the specifics here. Sankranti, this changing of sun between signs. Um, the solar day of Sankranti starts the new sidereal month. And so notice this, the solar day of Sankranti starts the new sidereal month. Now, we saw that one was at 44 minutes past midnight. The other one was 46 minutes past noon, right? There were a number of different variations to this calculation in ancient India. And when we say India, India as we see it as a coherent structure is since 1948. When we go into the ancient world, there were different kingdoms. There were different kingdoms that had different rules and used different calendars, and those different calendars had different rules. There were a number of different variations to this calculation in ancient India. The southwestern parts of India, ancient Malabar region, if the sun changed signs before 1 p.m., then that was the day of Sankranti. So we saw the one at 12:46. It fit to be that was Sankranti, right? And if it changed after, then the next day was utilized. In Tamil Nadu, if the Sankranti happens before sunset, then they use that day. So if the Sankranti happened at 3 o'clock in the Malabar, they are going to use the next day, where in Tamil Nadu, they're going to use that day. So all of a sudden, the month just changed a different day between these two places. Um, let's see. In Bengal, they use the day that the Sankranti before midnight. So that one that was 46 minutes after midnight, it just missed being the next Sankranti. That would have been the day before, right? In Odisha, the Sankranti was the Sankranti day was whatever solar day the sun changed signs. So that means as long as it changed signs before the next sunrise, that's the Sankranti day. So we can see that in different places, the month might have changed, and in other places it didn't. This creates all kinds of variability. And before India was one single country, and I don't mean British India, because even under British India, still the individual kingdoms kept their sovereignty with their calendars, and they used their own calendars. Once it became the modern India, there had to be this agreement. Hey, this state. Imagine if it was Christmas on Tuesday in California, but on Wednesday in Nevada. Imagine if New York had Christmas on a Friday, but Pennsylvania was celebrating Christmas on Saturday. Like, what kind of disturbance is going on, right? Of how do we celebrate this, you know? Um, all right, let's see. There were a number of different variations to this calculation, and we're down here somewhere. This would have ancient calendars in different kingdoms starting on different days. For those who use Pope Gregor's tropical calendar, this is of little importance. But in ancient times, this changed the beginning of the month and could have large implications of Adhika and Kshaya months that we're going to go into. Being that I do not calculate um, Adhika months, I utilize 1 p.m. In general, I myself use 1 p.m. for what day is going to be Sankranti or not. Rule in the Vedic calendar that I use. When the sun has changed signs, work is less effective. I use the analogy that if you install a fence on Sankranti, you realize the next day that it is in the wrong place and you have to repeat the work. In this way, it is better to refrain from work that day, and you can do a free of guilt, and you can do so free of guilt. So I don't work on Sankranti days, the day that is actually Sankranti. My nickname for Sankranti Day is Beach Day, as it is better to go to the beach. And I use 1 p.m. rule to ensure that the day you take off is the day where the sun is 0 degrees for the largest number of normal working hours. So that's my reasoning. In ancient times, Sankranti held religious importance. In astrology charts of each Sankranti are used to predict elements of the country's politics. For example, Libra Sankranti is the time to predict the country's finances. So this is used to predict different parts of government things for a country. Not going to go too into Sankranti charts there. Um, all right, but I am gonna pause for a moment because there's someone at the door. Ooh. And did I pause screen sharing and not recording? I think I did. Huh? Let's see. Stop share. That's not share again. All right. So we're back. Um, Sankranti. We're going. We're going. Um, dense stuff, right? There's a lot of math here to wrap our head around. Um, and it's not too hard of math, but it just takes a little work. Sankranti is the time the sun is 0 degrees. Even though this is clear, the actual day the month begins has different variation in different parts of the country, right? The moment the Sankranti is the moment of Sankranti is the same all over India, but the corresponding month for civil purposes is not the same all over India because of that. For example, some use the day, and so I just summarized what's in the footnote there. There are a few other rules in different parts of the country which can often change which day is considered the first day of the solar month. In this way, there is a large amount of variation within different regions of India, which creates a hard time calling something standard and actually being proper. So we can generalize that the Sankranti is the first day of the solar month, though we must understand that detailed calculations will have variations according to different traditions. The variations are also found in the naming of solar months. Now, just so you know, there was after India became independent India. There was a calendrical conference where they chose which they would use officially for India. And it has been very slow changing into that because a lot of people are like, I mean, imagine if you celebrate it. Um, Christmas on December 23rd. And then they're like, no, everybody has to do it on the 25th. You're like, no, 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 but our family does it on the 23rd. And so everybody can, and so there's this slow change to meet that unity there. And they all have their reasons for difference that have been with them for centuries, and their classical texts that were written 1500 years ago tell them this is how to do it. So we have that variation that's been slow to change, and the government of India is doing its best. So now we're going back to this concept here. The solar months are the hinges. The lunar months are the doors. So the solar months are the hinges, the lunar months are the doors. The lunar months are what is actually moving. It's the door, it's the month itself. But how we open or shut that door is going to be dependent on the solar months. So the Vedic slash Tantric calendar uses both the solar month and the lunar month. It uses both of them. It does not use one or the other. The Gregorian calendar is only a solar month based calculation. The Islamic calendar is only a lunar based calculation. The Vedic Tantric calendar is a solely lunar or Luni-Solar. It's a sun moon calendar because it's using solar months hinging the synodic month doors. The lunar month has its name determined by the new moon conjunction occurring relative to the particular Sankranti. So the lunar month is named based upon where that month happens, which Sankranti to Sankranti the lunar month is happening in. So the sun is naming the lunation. Everybody with me, right? Sun is naming the lunation. Vedic, and now just to differentiate, and I don't know if I say, I don't think I say it down, but here, but the sun is naming the lunation. Who names the days of the month? The moon names the days of the month because it's the sixth waning phase, the seventh waning phase, the ninth waning phase. So whether it's the sixth, seventh, or eighth day is based upon the moon's phase. But even that is again dancing with the sun and the moon because it's it's the phase at sunrise. So the whole calendar is a dance between the sun and the moon. We're looking at what is the lunation happening? The month starts when the moon has the new moon conjunction, but its name is based upon what solar month it's inside of. The name of the day is based upon the lunar phase, but at sunrise, which is based upon the sun. So we're a true luni-solar calendar utilizing the sun and the moon are both counterbalancing each other. And so we call this the Yugmaka, the balancing of polarities. So when we use a Vedic tantric calendar, we are using something that lives inside of sun moon balance. You got the beauty of that, right? There's the beauty. Um, the Vedic and Hindu rituals and vratas, rich like I'm gonna fast on this day, or I'm going to not eat wheat on this day, or something of that nature. Vratas are determined according to the lunar month, the door. But the door is determined based upon the solar month, the hinge that opens the door. The solar months are generally named from the lunar month. Um, and so then it goes the other way. The solar month are generally named from the lunar month, which is named from the nakshatra where the moon was most likely full. This is why the name of the lunar month correlates with a nakshatra opposite the sign. If the full moon is in Chitra, the new moon conjunction will most likely be in Aries. So we're gonna get that between these two charts here. That's always one that's people takes a. Did you understand that, Debbie? Are you ready for the diagram?
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Ready
but
for
I
the
like looking at diagrams or I can't wait for your diagram.
um, and so we can see that the Sankranti of Mesha, we're getting this Chaitra month. So the lunar month is called Chaitra. in the Sankranti of Mesha. And that's happening in March, April. And so if we look, so the Sankranti of Mesha is called Chaitra. And so if we look down here, so the Sankranti that happens in Aries is called Chaitra, but the actual nakshatra Chaitra is all the way over here. So you see it's opposite. So when the Sankranti is here, we're doing it based upon where the full moon is going to be. So the naming is based upon the full moon, even though we're using the new moon conjunction to do the calculation. And so this chart has that. And notice when the basically the new moon conjunction is in Aries, that Sankranti we're all the way over here in Libra, right? And so we're calling it Vishaka. So we're getting this opposition because we're naming based upon the full moon, which is opposite side of the zodiac. All right, I'm gonna do a few more things and then I'm gonna complain about something. Um, all right, and so we can see the name of the lunar month based upon the Sankranti, and we got the approximate time period that this month happens. So between March and April we have Chaitra. Between April and May we have Vishaka. Between May and June we have the month of Jeshta. So the Vaishnavas have their Vaishnava name for it, which we saw when we looked at the calendar. We saw a variation that was used of these, and we can also see that there's a Shaiva variation to name all of these. So we can name them based upon this. There's also the Rudra names, the Vaishnava names, but the standard Vedic names are based upon the nakshatras. And they're the standard one used across India. It's very rare to use the Shaiva or the Vaishnava ones. Um, in the diagram below, you will notice that the month of Chaitra begins at the new moon conjunction before Mesha Sankranti. So it is a before Mesha Sankranti. It's not an after Mesha Sankranti. So Chaitra is before Mesha Sankranti. Vaishaka is before Vrishabha Sankranti. And this is important for the next thing that we're going to learn. So making sure that we understand this. Now, one thing, now here's my complaint that I'm throwing in here. There's something that's pretty viral on the social media zone where people will say, it's the full moon. And they'll say, this full moon is in, they'll say, this full moon is in Ashwini, blah, 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 Ashwini, Ashwini, Ashwini. The sun. This full moon is in Barney, blah, 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 blah about Barney. This full moon is in Kritika, blah, 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 blah. There is no scriptural validity for looking at the full moon in this way. The full moon, we're not judging it based upon what star it's in. We're basing the full moon based upon what Sankranti, the new moon before it, happened in. That is what makes the quality that full moon has is based. So this full moon, this lunar month is the Chaitra Masa. This full moon is the Vaishaka Masa. So this is the Chaitra Purnima. When we do our Science of Light initiations, we do our Science of Light initiations in where are we here? Kartik, right there. So we do our initiations in Kartik Purnima. And why do we do it in Kartik Purnima? Not because the full moon is in, and I have to look over here to see what the opposites would be. Not because it's in Jeshta, Anuradha, or Vishaka, because it could be in either of these. right? It could be in any of those three. And we're not doing the initiations on that full moon because it's in one of those. We're doing it because the new moon conjunction was over here in a particular Rashi. And so there's this, and I'm going to call it New Age Jyotish, or New Age Vedic astrology. I won't use the word Jyotish. New Age Vedic astrology, where oh, this is the full moon's happening and it's in this nakshatra, da da da. We do it based, the certain full moon of this time of year has a certain energy. The full moon of the fall right after the equinox has a certain energy. The full moon midsummer is our Guru Purnima. It's our time to remember teachers, our time to work with teachers. That is the traditional way to be working with our full moons, is to get what is the month of this full moon is the full moon of the month of which of these? Chaitra, Vaishakha, Jeshta, and what does that month represent? That is what should be shared in these online forums. This is what is proper Vedic astrology. Otherwise, you were kind of taking parts and blending together and doing something that is not traditional, was not traditionally done. Just to be clear with all of that. Now, the Sankrantis, you can, if you want to predict war for a country, let's look at Mesha Sankranti. If we wanted to predict the finances for a country, like, are we going to have a depression? Is the stock market going to crash? We pull up the chart for Tula Sankranti, when the sun entered Libra. And when the sun entered Libra, that's how we predict the finances for a country. Now, the new moon, for this, we worship Lakshmi. That's we're making sure that this zone here is at the very end of this, we are doing a Lakshmi worship to support the financial elements of the kingdom. Now, that Sankranti, you might be like, oh, that Sankranti, it's going to happen at a moment in time. So if it happened at, what was the next Sankranti coming? The Libra Sankranti is going to be at 0044 on October 17th. Now 0044 in California, which is what my calendar is 9:44 of the previous Gregorian day in New York. And if I take that into France, that's going to be 3:44 in the day. So the stars rising at that moment are going to be completely different in France than they will be in the US. So the finances of each country are going to be slightly different based upon this and these predictions and these moments. All right. So let's see, going back. So we got the solar months are the hinges and the lunar months. And so following this up for our next part that we want to make sure that we understand, Chaitra is the new moon conjunction before Mesha Sankranti. We all got that. Now, the lunar month is named, okay, there's a few things, I guess, before we go into that. The lunar month is named according to the solar month in which it has the new moon conjunction. Presently in India, it is the sidereal solar year, beginning with Aries, determines the entire lunar year. In the ancient calendar, the mutual solar relations. Okay. And there's lots of footnotes here for various details of that. When the standard All India calendar was created in 1952 to 1957, they debate it for 5 years. Okay. The Calendar Reform Committee recommended that the lunisolar months be linked to the tropical months. This suggestion was not followed, since the calendar had been linked to the sidereal months for approximately 1 millennium. And I want you to just get this here. The Indian government instead created a tropical solar calendar with months named after the classical sidereal nakshatra months, which was not accepted by Indians. No one accepted it. They tried to merge two different systems, and people were like, no, we're not having it. Um, the committee named the Review of Committee of Indian Calendar and Positional Astronomy met in 1986 to make a new recommendations because nobody was using the recommendation from the 52 to 57 conferences. And so in 1982, they made new recommendations, which also were not followed. Finally, new recommendations were made in 2004, and they were accepted to make solar months coincide with sidereal zodiac signs. And so that is what the calendar is. So really getting here that there's this ancient way, and that this calendar there's so many variations that literally what is being used today in India, based upon the government of India, was decided in 2004. And you could say that, different panchangas used what they were using standard, but India, as this is trying to get every state to celebrate the holidays at the same time. That way, governments can close down, and Tamil Nadu's government and Madhya Pradesh's government can both have an off day on the same day, and it not be, oh, those guys are off today, we're off tomorrow, so there's 2 days that we can't do anything here between them. Um, one thing to notice, because there's people that still want to link the calendar to the tropical months. And I am very friendly to their idea. I'm not sure I agree that the calendar should be linked to the sidereal stars. I fully think that for human chart reading, we should be using the stars and the stars only. But for the calendar, I lean towards believing that we should be focused more on tropical months for the festivities, not the sidereal months. And Param Guruji argues that's a big disagreement between Param Guruji and I. So he's the stars are the superior determination of everything, and I don't agree, because that means that um, Shiva Ratri is going to slowly move through the year. And then we're the same as these Muslims who have Eid, and you don't even know when Eid is going to be because it's not tied to the seasons at all. And we'll look at that. I have a chart of that in a little bit. But that's a side note. And anybody that wants to, I'll put a link here to my views and why I hold those views. I'll link that here to this tropical months thing. But I have probably an hour-long read on that with research. So the Luni-Solar calendar is a type of cosmic attunement. And so notice how the government and the people, they're like, no, this is how we're tuning to this cosmos. No, this is how we're tuning to the cosmos. No, this is how we're tuning. And there's all these variations of how do we tune to this sun-moon polarity? How are we tuning to the sun-moon polarity? And we have this pranayam that we've been practicing in this course that literally is meant to tune us to that sun-moon polarity. All right. And so, tunement, it is the interaction of the solar year with the lunar cycles that determines the intercalary months, which allows a lunar months to align with the seasons. This is a dance between the sun and the moon. And so, not only do we as people have this dance between our masculine and feminine elements, but a country and the calendar it uses has a dance between the sun and moon attributes. This dance is the balance we aim to achieve in ourselves between the male and female polarities. Um, I bring a little something in here with the Chinese calendar. All right. Uh, Broken hinges, missing doors. The first day of the Lunar New Year is Chaitra Shukla Pratipad. The calculation of the month of Chaitra is the new moon conjunction before Mesha Sankranti. So we talked about that, right? It is therefore the solar year beginning with Aries, which determines the entire lunar year. So it's that solar month. The solar year is determining the lunar year. And that solar year is broken down into solar months. And that solar month, that when the sun enters Aries, determine that new moon just before is determining the nomenclature for that next month, which determines the nomenclature for the whole year. That's what's being referred to here. Still talking. I'm still making sure that we're getting this dance between the sun and the moon. It is therefore, in general, new moon conjunctions and Sankrantis occur alternatively. It means that for each Sankranti, there's one new moon conjunction, right? So there's a Sankranti in that 30 days. There should be a new moon conjunction. That's what happens normally. Therefore, each door has its own hinge. Each lunar month has a Sankranti to work with. Normally, the sun and the moon interrelate equally, but there's something called Adhika and Kshaya. And these Adhika and Kshaya months are when they do not have this interrelate equally. And Adhika Masa is when there's two lunations in one Sankranti. And Adhika Masa is when there's two lunations in one Sankranti, two moons in one sun. And a Kshaya Masa is when there's two Sankrantis with only one lunation. A whole lunation happens and there's no new moon in it. An Adhika Masa, and so just to before I move on from this, an Adhika Masa is when there's two lunations in one Sankranti. So we have something that still exists today that is the silliest thing when you use it in the Gregorian calendar, yet people still use it in the Gregorian calendar. When there's two full moons in one month, they call it a blue moon. And why is that? Why if there's two, why if in September there's two full moons is one blue? Is there a September moon and then a blue September moon? So this concept of a blue moon is left over from when Europeans were using this system. And when Europeans were originally using the system and we had two lunations in one Sankranti, we had a blue moon. Everybody get that, like, oh my gosh, that's and when it's like when we use the term a blue moon to mean something rare, this is why it means something rare. It's this thing that only happens rarely, maybe once every 3 years. It's about 3.3 years is the average cycle that we get a true blue moon in this sense. So this Adhika Masa, we have two lunations in one month. So remember the solar month named the lunation. So if we have two lunations in one Sankranti, they're both going to have the same name. Hence the blue moon, right? So, and Akshaya Masa, if there's a Sankranti with no lunation in it, and so we have the one name, I'll go back up to the chart. If we had Chaitra, and then there's no lunation in what should be the Vrishabha Sankranti, and we go to Jeshta, all of a sudden this month disappears. That's called Akshaya Masa. And if by chance there's Shravana, and there's two new moons in this Shravana, we actually have two Shravanas. So it's Shravana and Adhika Shravana. Where if there was no lunation in this Vrishabha Sankranti, then all of a sudden it becomes a Kshaya Vaishak. The Vaishak disappears. What if there was a holiday in that Vaishak and it just disappeared? What kind of luck is that? Not good luck for that holiday. Not that year. And so we studied a little earlier when we were studying tithis. We studied the Adhika Tithi is when there's two tithis with the same name, right? At one day or 2 days, the tithi crossed two sunrises. And so 2 days have the same tithi name. And then there's where the tithi disappeared. You know, it was the just the tithi changed just after sunrise, and then it went and it changed again just before the next sunrise. So we have an Adhika Tithi and a Kshaya Tithi. And we saw the verse that Abhinavagupta was using relative to the Adhika and the Kshaya Tithis, right? And how he brought that into the breath as a yawn and a sneeze. Um, the solar month names the lunar month, while the lunar day names the solar day. So the sun names the moon's month, and the moon names the sun's day, right? So we get this beautiful dance between the sun and the moon. So Adhika Masa. We're going to go a little deeper into this. There may occasionally be a shorter lunation that does not have a Sankranti. This makes two new moon conjunctions within one solar month. In order for this to happen, the new moon conjunction needs to happen right after the Sankranti. And the second new moon conjunction will happen just before the next Sankranti. So just very similar to where the Tithi changes just after sunrise and or just before sunrise and then just after sunrise of the next day. So it that Tithi covered 2 days. Where here the we're getting that change of happening right after the sun change signs. So instead of a sunrise, we're getting a sun changing signs. But the same principle is being applied. The additional lunation becomes an intercalated lunar month called an Adhika Masa. So this Adhika Masa, this is, you could call it the 13th month. Now we only get a 13th month every 3 years. Otherwise, there's only 12 months in a year, 12 lunations in a year. In this case, both lunar months will take the same name. The first month is called Adhika, additional, abundant, intercalated, and the second month is called Nija, innate. For example, there could be an Adhika Shravana Masa and a Nija Shravana Masa. Most traditions utilize the natural Nija month for standard festivals. Adhika months ordinarily occur once every 3 years. Kshaya Masa, I think we talked enough about the Kshaya Mantha, how it's different. They're much more rare. They happen like about every 50 years. A Kshaya, very rare. Intercalary months happens every 3 years, where the variations requires new moon conjunction just before an end after the next. Only three months of Mrigashira, Pasha, and Magha can be Kshaya because they're the 3 lunar months that turn on 29 days each. So those shorter 29 solar days are the ones where a Kshaya can happen. This is caused by the sun at its perihelion, which we learned about when we were studying the eclipses. Presently, somewhere during January 2nd to 4th, Kshaya Masa runs with the next month simultaneously and is also called the Kshaya month runs with the next month simultaneously. It's also called, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, or a paired month. And a Kshaya Masa happens once about every 141 years. Okay, I was wrong when I said 50. So once every 141 years. So imagine having two holidays. Imagine like it's Thanksgiving and then 3 days later it's Christmas. That would be the Western equivalent to a Kshaya Masa. So it's bad luck for those holidays in this way. Um, um, The Rig Veda says the sun and the moon preceding and following each other because of the Maya, like two children playing round the sacrifice. Time is seen according to the sun's movement because it is steady and constant each year. It beholds all existence. While the lunar months move all over the place like the emotions constantly fluctuating, yet they create the moment. The Vedic calendar keeps stability with the sun, like the Atman keeps an individual centered. The individual happenings are guided by the moon, while the emotions fluctuating across the mind. So, this dance of the sun and moon. This is the little note here. The results of being born in the different lunar months are listed in Janardhan Harji's Mansagari. Someone born in the month of Chaitra is likely to be happy, perform good works, be egotistical, have bloodshot eyes, deal with anger, and have a changeable life. So Audrey, does this thereby show our this is basically tropic this is the tropical Aries.
Very interesting.
Okay. So we have an interpretation for each of these tropical months, tropical, lunations, right? And that does match slightly with our, deal with anger. That's what people associate with the Aries, right?
Wow.
Okay. So does that ground a little bit more? You see, we literally are calculating this with our seasonal lunar months.
I really would like to go in and study this a little more, or just understand. So yeah, thank you.
And birth in the month of Ashada gives sons and grandsons. Shravana, equanimity in good and bad times. While Bhadrapada makes one soft-spoken but talkative. So you can see this is the tropical. This is Western astrology here, but it's the Notice it's our nomenclature that is incorrect. They're using star names for non-star months. If they were using seasonal names for their signs, then no one would disagree. We'd be like, oh, we would almost be overlapping the systems, right? Which we can, which the Vedic, we see here in this way. All right. So we have a few more things to cover. A few more things. I know we're hitting time. Um, the Kshaya month happens only once or twice a century as an astronomical rule. The intercalary month happens about once every 3 years. It is the key for keeping the solar and lunar cycles in harmony and thereby allowing a functional luni-solar calendar. The intercalation is how lunations, moon, are wedded to the year, sun, and it is this wedding that keeps the lunations in tune with the seasons. To understand the mathematical harmonics more deeply, we shall calculate the first 6 years of Kali Yuga. First 6 years of Kali Yuga. Just to get that Surya Siddhanta, a lot of times people have all these weird yuga theories out there. They're like, but some yogi meditating, he was enlightened, so he understood. It's like, there's like multiple texts with hard math giving exact calculations of the yugas. And that meditating yogi who said whatever he said, he was not using any of those texts for any of the calculations that he gave. And so there's hard calculations here, like literally going back to the first 6 years of Kali Yuga to see the actual functioning of the intercalary month. So according to Surya Siddhanta, Kali Yuga began on midnight between the 17th and 18th of February, 3102 BC. So we have the exact time of Kali Yuga. It was midnight. It was a midnight that fell on it was a new moon conjunction at midnight exact, giving us that beginning of Kali Yuga. At the end of the first sidereal year. So think about it. If like if it right there started um, exactly at midnight, um, we had a new moon conjunction. One sidereal year from that moment, one sidereal year from that moment, At the end of that sidereal year and the beginning of the second, 12 synodic months passed. And remember, there's only 354 synodic days. So to get to 365, we need a little bit more. And there's 10.8917. Look at that, this calculation. That many 10 days point, so almost 11 days of the next lunation before that sidereal year changed. And so this leftover amount of time is called the Shuddhi. It's the time between the moment of the new moon conjunction and the subsequent Sankranti, also seen as the time gained by the lunar solar calendar over the solar. When this time Shuddhi attains the length of a full lunation, then there is an entire lunation without a Sankranti. This lunar month has no hinge to turn on and becomes our Adhika Masa. So the Adhika Masa is not a man-made creation. It is an observation of the lunations happening. No election times are given during this month, marriages, business openings, moving into new homes. The Shuddhi relationship between the lunation and solar months has a regular 19-year cycle, minus 2 hours. The inherent 19-year luni-solar cycle is called the Metonic cycle by the Greeks and modern astronomers. And so just to get that this cycle of Adhika Masa has an inherent 19-year cycle. And I'm going to bring this up again in a little bit, this 19-year cycle. So there's a math here. So at the end of the first sidereal year, and so I'm going back because this is a little side note here. So at the end of the first year of Kali Yuga, after 12 full moons, or 12 new moons, whichever way we want to count. I guess we'll count new moon because it started with new moon. 12 synod, we had this many days left over, and this is called our Shuddhi, right? At the end of the second year, after 12 synodic months passed, because we had 10, almost 11 from year one, we have about that much the next year. And so that adds up that we have this many extra days before the next Sankranti, 21.78. Then after year 3, by the next year, there are 12 lunations plus, look at this, 32.675 days. So that's an extra month. So naturally, there's going to be this extra month that finds its way into the calendar. And it finds its way into the calendar in the Vedic calculation. This is actually 32 days. We subtract a lunation of 29.53, and it gives us 13 lunations and 3.5 days left for. So it gives us now this 3 extra days. So then that gets added on to the next, basically 10.8917, right? And then it goes in until an Adhika Masa shows up again. Now, this 3 days, I'm going to show you a chart when we compare the Adhika Masas of the Vedic calendar to the Hebrew calendar, how that 3 days shows up and makes a difference. Because the Hebrew calendar isn't using that 3 days. They're only using the Metonic cycle, and we get some variation from that. And so here I give this exact calculation for anybody that wants to get this. You can see year 0 to 1 of Kali Yuga. We have 10 days, then it becomes 21 days. Then because it became 32, we're down to 3 days before the next Sankranti. Then it became 14, then 24, then down to 6 days before the next Sankranti. So this gives us this Adhika Masa, this extra month. We call it Adhika. The English is intercalary month. And this is very important. If you're using a Vedic calendar, you're going to be like, oh, what's going on here? It's the Adhika Masa. Hello, every 3 years we're getting this Adhika Masa. And so you want to make sure that you're there. And I haven't been a Jyotishi inside of a Kshaya Masa. I don't know. Somebody Google when the next Kshaya Masa is. I'd love to know when the next Kshaya Masa is going to happen. All right. And so this right here is me with words explaining what's shown here in the diagram. Same basic concept. All right. So we all got how we have this Adhika Masa in here and Kshaya Masa. And we also, if you forgot your Kshaya Tithis and Adhika Tithis, make sure you go back and review when we were studying eclipses and I gave a very elaborate teaching on that and how it was used and interpreted. So we have the beginning of the year, the Varsha Pravesha. There are, and so now I'm slightly going into, we got our months, we got our lunar months and how the lunar months are and sun, moon are dancing to create these, right? And this beautiful polarities that this calendar is working to balance and just get like, wow, do I want to be that balanced? Is your male and female energies that balanced inside as this calendar? We can hope to be as balanced as this calendar is. And and we can understand that the sages were working on that balance if they were balancing in this way, right? So now this calendar is starting from Mesha Sankranti. Um, there's other calendars that are starting from the spring equinox. Um, so this beginning of the year, the Varsha Pravesha, there are various beginnings of the year for various purposes, just as there are various types of years for different purposes. The calendar year for dating, the civil year, this is the civil year, Savana, is for government work. And the civil year is January 1st. No matter what, the whole world uses Pope Gregor's January 1st. That is called the civil year, Savana. And just to get, there was a Savana year. The concept of a civil year has existed in all the ancient texts. So it's not like it's a modern thing that, okay, we have what the government is using. So it was very common for there to be the emperor's year. And then we would have our local little kingdoms year, which today we would call, it would be more like the countries versus our states. But at this point, the empire of the Catholic Church has still colonized all of our time for the civil year. So the whole planet uses the Savana year of the Catholic Church um, for government related work. There's also a seasonal year for agricultural work, and that's our tropical year. So we want to use a tropical year, the equinoxes. Then there's a fiscal year. And so the fiscal year in our modern time period is April 15th or April 1st, whatever it is, when taxes are due, right? In the Vedic, this is what Diwali was. Diwali was the fiscal year. And so when what we're celebrating on Diwali is the redoing of the books from the Vedic tradition. Then we have the academic year, which is September to every September we're starting a new academic year. Then there's the astronomical year of Mesha Sankranti. Then there's the lunar new year, which is the new moon just before the Mesha Sankranti. Then we have Diwali. All right. So get that there's these different types. Like what do we call the new year? Um, and there is in some Vedic texts, there's a Margashira year, this fall time year, where the um, first new moon after the fall equinox. There's a few Vedic texts that use that as the new year. And I find it quite interesting because that's what the Hebrews use for their new year. And the fact that what the Hebrews use for the new year is showing up in some Vedic texts is showing, and just to get that the Vedic culture went all the way to Turkey in the ancient world. After the Islamic invasions wiped out most of the indigenous cultures of the Middle East all the way up, I mean, literally to Pakistan, that we've lost all the indigenous calendars from there. But in the ancient world, the Vedic culture went all the way to Turkey, at least from archaeological evidence that we have. Maybe they went farther. I don't know. But archaeological evidence shows us Vedic culture went all the way to Turkey. Um, and so it's quite interesting that overlap there. All right. So Makara Sankranti. So Makara Sankranti is also used as by some as a new year. Shares the same astronomical roots as the Gregorian New Year. So Makara Sankranti is the sun going into Capricorn, and that is lines up with our Western New Year. Why do we celebrate the New Year January 1st? Why isn't the New Year celebrated in the springtime? And so that lines up with this concept of this Makara Sankranti New Year. Makara Sankranti is generally the middle of January because it's using a stellar calculation. Um, it originally, not anymore, marked the changing the Dakshina Ayana. That's what we'll talk about that our next class. The sun moving towards the southern hemisphere, because we're going to get back into our sundial in the next class. Karka Sankranti is the middle of July. I haven't seen any cultures really using Karka Sankranti, meaning summer solstice for their new year. So there's the fall equinox or first new moon after the fall equinox. There's the winter solstice, first new moon after the winter solstice. There's the spring equinox, first new moon after the spring equinox, or the new moon before the spring equinox, or the new moon before the Mesha Sankranti. Those are all very standard beginnings of the year. I haven't seen the Karka Sankranti, not that many, and maybe I'm missing the culture that's using the this as their new year. But for most people, it's like this end of the year because the sun is now, the days are now getting shorter. It's like this going to sleep kind of frequency. Solar calendar has been used for civil purposes, work days, government planning, business, while the lunar calendar and tithis are used for religious purposes. It's general throughout the millennia. The lunar months are utilize tithis, while the solar month utilizes days of the week. The overall calendar is luni-solar because it is regulated by the movements of the moon, but it is made to fit the divisions of the solar year. The national calendar of India is prepared by the Indian Meteorological Department and published annually in the Indian Astronomical Ephemeris. And now it's being utilized because of, we saw the rectifications that happened since 1948. A calendar is, and so this is a little quote here. And this is a quote by Jose Arguelles. Some people might know him. A calendar is more than merely a device for numbering of the days. All calendars are directly bound to the ever recurring cycles of nature, most commonly manifested in the rotation of the earth and its cosmic influences. Their underlying purpose is to help man adjust to these cycles and the forces that permeate them by achieving rhythmic flow of natural events. Ultimately, this brings a sense of harmony with the universe. So, why are we doing all this? We're trying to attain this harmony, right? Harmony with the universe. I have just a little more to share on some other calendars so that we can, this is almost like the last one, right? But I guess I have just a few notes on other calendars that just to put our Vedic calendar relative to all these other elements of time that we see out there and other people using. Oh, and Audrey has a note. 2124 is the next Kshaya So when was the last one? Like probably 1980 or something zone?
Three, I think I saw.
Three. I was too young to enjoy it. Not fair, and I won't live to the next one. All right. So, but how cool to know, right? And maybe your kid or grandkid can you get to be like celebrate the Kshaya Masa for me. All right, other calendrical systems. The lunisolar calendars are used by Hindus, Buddhists, Tibetans, Chinese, Mongolians, Koreans, and Hebrews. So this lunisolar calendar is still completely in use. It is a real calendar. The Japanese used the solilunar calendar until 1873. And so notice the Japanese didn't make it up here, right? They jumped out in 1873. The Babylonian calendar, which is derived from the Sumerian calendar, the Greek calendar, the pre-Islamic calendar, and the pre-Christian Germanic calendar were all lunisolar. So we can see that throughout the world, this was being used. And notice I only mention the Germanic calendar. It could have been all of Europe. We don't know. We have proof. We have proof that the Germans were using the solilunar calendar. We don't have proof that anyone else was. Most likely, if we look at Stonehenge and these other things, they all were. Um, the Islamic, okay, so how does this, why do the Islamics not throw, why do the Muslims not join us over here? The Islamic calendar is completely lunar. It has no relationship to the position or movement of the sun. So the 12 lunar months regress through the season. So they don't add an Adhika Masa. So it literally, their holidays, like if you look here, I just did this graph and this is ChatGPT. So I'm not going to vouch for it being 100% correct, but it should be pretty good. And so if we look right here, so Eid, and I said, just give me a 33-year cycle because it repeats every 33 years. So Eid, if we take Eid in June on month one, in month three, Eid is going to be in May. Month five, Eid is still be in May. Month seven, Eid is going to be in April. Month nine, Eid is going to be, what is this, in March. So literally imagine if just to for the Christian mindset, imagine if you celebrated Christmas in December for 2 years, and then January for 2 years, and then February for 3 years, and then Christmas was in March for 2 years, and then imagine Christmas in April. Followed by, and now you're starting to be in your 20s and you're getting Christmas in July, Christmas in August, right? Kind of. So this is so the Islamic calendar is moving in this way. They're not putting an Adhika Masa to rectify it to the sun. So it is not a solely lunar calendar. The Hebrew calendar is a solely lunar calendar, and the ancient Hebrew calendar was the same as the Sumerian calendar. So we can understand the Sumerian and Babylonian calendars through the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar is lunisolar and starts its first month, Nisan, on the first lunation after the spring equinox. The names of the months in the Hebrew calendar are the Babylonian month names. So the Hebrews use the Babylonian months, which are the Sumerian months. So the Sumerians, they're eternally living up to this day through these months. The calendar was originally observational, based on the first sighting of the crescent moon in the, and so this first sighting of the crescent moon makes it so that the Vedic calendar uses the and let's see. I want to get this variation because it's important for us to understand to understand how something differs helps us understand what we're using. And what we're using in the Vedic tradition is the astronomically calculated new moon conjunction. So I know that the new moon conjunction is 0044. So it's 44 minutes after midnight. Now, in the Babylonian and Hebrew calendar, they didn't use the math. They waited till they saw the next crescent moon. So they start the month about 24 hours after the Vedic calendar starts. So if you look at when they're celebrating their new moon celebrations versus the Vedic new moon celebrations, it's literally off by about 24 hours. And the Vedic is using the sunrise time, where the Babylonians and the Hebrews are using, and I say are because the Babylonians aren't there anymore, but we're using the sunset time. To what was it at sunset? All right. Now, in the fourth century, the Hebrew calendar changed from the Babylonian. Fourth century of the Common Era. And what they did is they integrated the Metonic cycle. And instead of doing the hinges and the doors like the Babylonians did, they said, they said, what we're going to do with the Metonic cycle is we know that every 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, 19 years, we add an Adhika Masa. And so they stopped doing the hinges and the doors. Now, you might say, oh, well, that's not very scientific. But if you go to India, if I use the sunrise Sankranti versus the 1 o'clock Sankranti versus the sunset Sankranti versus the sunrise to sunset Sankranti, I might have a different Adhika Masa than my next state over. And so what the Hebrews did is they fixed it to the Metonic cycle in the fourth century because there were Jews in Persia, there were Jews in Egypt, there were Jews in Europe, in Italy and Germany, there were Jews in Spain, there were Jews in Yemen, and by using the Metonic cycle, all of them were able to celebrate their holidays at the same time. And so they used the Metonic cycle, and they that was based upon the hinge in the door concept, but they no longer use the hinge in the doors. They just use the math that was based on the hinge in the doors. The Vedic calendar still uses the hinges in the doors, but they use the mathematics of the new moon conjunction. The Hebrews are using this rising of the sun of the crescent moon, but they're using the math. So the two decide. So each is using more the astronomy in one place, but the math in another place. Everybody with me on that? You don't look like you're getting it there, Debbie. Um, all right. Important. It's a key difference for us to understand how no matter how hard we try to be 100% natural, we're always there's a human involved measuring things. And the human is measuring this natural cycle, but no matter what happens, there's a human that's interacting with this natural cycle. All right. And so utilizing the Metonic cycle instead. And so what this another difference that we get between the Hebrew and the Vedic solely lunar calendar that helps us understand a little deeper our Vedic calendar versus the Hebrew calendar. We can see that and so this is a chart from 2025 to 2032 that shows the overlap between the Hebrew and Vedic calendars. And you can see that, and I gotta squeeze my eyes. So the standard is right here, this month of Nisan and Chaitra. So Chaitra and Nisan are the same. This Chaitra is the first month, the first Vedic month, and Nisan is the first Hebrew month, both being calculated from the spring equinox. And for those who are Christian, get that this is how Easter is calculated. So Easter is being calculated based on these concepts as well. Um, and we can see that they stay the same correlation. So all of 2025, the Hebrew and Vedic calendar match. And then we can see in 2026, there's this Adhika Masa that gets added, Jeshta, right there. And then there's a mismatch of lunar months until just before the spring equinox. The Hebrews only add an Adhika Masa just before the spring equinox. The Vedic calendar can add it in Jeshta, can add it in Chaitra, can add it in Bhadrapada. There's three different places that we tend to add an Adhika Masa in the Vedic because we're just letting it naturally pop itself in there. Where the Hebrew calendar, you can see only, and there's more, but it didn't fit in my screenshot. It only is added right here before the spring equinox. And so we can see that there's a slight difference between the two lunar calendars. Here there's a slight difference just until they correlate Adhika Masas. Now, why am I spending so much time on this Hebrew calendar? Because before the all India lunar calendar, this would happen in India between different states. So if the different state was using a different Sankranti rule, they might be off. Their holidays might be completely off for what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here, 7, 8. So here in 2026, the two calendars are off by 8 months. Over here in 2029, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The lunar calendars are off by 10 months. Over here, they're off by 3 months. So this month variation would commonly happen in ancient India between the Vijayanagar Empire and Kerala. They would be off holiday celebrations for a few months and then they'd come back together. And then they'd, 2 years later, they'd be off for a little bit and coming back together. And so the all India calendar is really working on saying, come on, everybody, let's all India celebrate the holidays at the same time. I know your ancient things said 1 o'clock and we're using sunrise. Just like bear with us here so the whole country can celebrate together. And again, it's a mitigation between the human being and the cosmos, this calculation here. And whose job is it to mitigate between the cosmos and the calendar and mankind? The Jyotishi. This is the astrologer's job. All right, our last little thing to get in here to make sure that we understand. So the Julian and the Gregorian. So the West used the Julian calendar, which replaced the Roman calendar in 46 BCE. And now I've seen some things say 45 BCE, and I think it's a calculation thing there. It was introduced by Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar replaced the Roman calendar. The Roman calendar was Luni-Solar. But what was happening was, so we can add so the astrologers were in charge of adding the extra months to keep the tune going, right? And now imagine if the astrologers were Democrats. And when Obama was in office, they added an Adhika Masa every month so that he got 3 extra months of being president. And then when Trump got elected, they added no Adhika Masas so that his term would be as short as possible. And that's what they were doing. And so Julius Caesar said, you guys are corrupt. We're not doing this system anymore. We're just going to be a straight civil calendar. And so they say he broke the lunar calendar. He broke the Luni-Solar calendar, but they say he broke the lunar calendar is how they describe it. And his astrologer, and they say astronomer. That's what they say. They call him an astronomer, but he was an astronomer astrologer. So his astronomer astrologer was this guy, and this is the guy who helped him break the calendar. So the first year of the Julian calendar, the new moon after the winter solstice, that's what we call, all of us, January 1st. So January 1st was the new moon after the winter solstice on 46 BCE. And now we call that day January 1st because that was the year that Julius Caesar broke the calendar. Now, does that feel like lining up with the universe to you? Or does that feel like lining up with Julius Caesar? Right? So just to get when we're using this Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, we are lining up with Julius Caesar's breaking of the lunar calendar. Um, all right. So let's see. Now, there was some issues with the why aren't we using the Julian calendar that Julius Caesar made? Why are we using the Gregorian? Because they were not properly using the leap year. And so after so much time of not using the leap year, and just to be clear, at the time of Julius Caesar, the winter solstice was December 25th. So December 25th was the winter solstice at the time of Julius Caesar. And so what we call Christmas was a celebration of the winter solstice. But what happened because they weren't using the leap year correctly, by 1581, the winter solstice was falling on December 11th. So it was not. So just to get as it moves, we see how the stars move progressively relative to the seasons. If you don't have the right leap years, the days start moving relative to the seasons. And so because they weren't using the right leap years, literally Christmas went from being on the solstice to being, let's see, 11, the 11, it became December 11th and Christmas. So it became 14 days off of the solstice. And so Pope Gregor disappeared 14 days from the calendar. And he didn't do it for Christmas, he did it for Easter because he wanted Easter to line up with the spring equinox in its proper way. And the thing is, Easter has to be on a Sunday. So it's not lining up with the equinox exactly, but he didn't care. And so now we have the winter solstice on December 21st. We have Christmas on December 25th. We have New Year's on January 1st. All of them are basically trying to celebrate the same thing. And then we have Makar Sankranti, which is the Hindu calendar running off, which is January 14th or 15th in zone. And so all these holidays are meant to be celebrating the same winter solstice energy. Minus and minus you throw the new moon in there and yeah, so all right. So all right. So conclusion. There are many variations throughout India based on regional kingdom and time period. You know, we're trying to get this standardization. What is more important for the practitioner than the details of each of these calculations that we've spent all this time going over is the general concepts of the sun and the moon creating this system of time together. There are 12 solar signs based on these 12.3 lunations. The full moon names are the solar signs. The lunar month is named by the solar sign containing the new moon conjunction. The interaction makes the Luni-Solar calendar. um, and just as a I might have said something. I might have had like a 0.412 off. I might have said South India and it was really Southern East India, and they're doing something different in Southwest India. I could have, there's so many details here, and we literally could go double the depth into the variations. The dynamics of the calendar are fundamental to how we look at time and how we calculate it. And we understand this complexity, and we also understand there's a simplicity that there's a simplicity of 12.3 lunations in the year, right? There's that simple simplicity there. And then there's all the human math that we're trying to get to make sure that we're staying in tune with that. And I want to make sure that we differentiate those two things. That what's happening is this simple sun moon relationship. And as humans, we're doing all these complexities to kind of have our relationship to it and to keep that relationship so that we can make calendars that are easy for us. If we didn't need those calendars, if we didn't all have to celebrate at the same time, we could just look up and go with the flow, right? But we're making this math to keep our society in tune together. And that's one of the big things of why the All India calendar is so important, is because they're working on trying to make everybody celebrate together. It's one of the things that the Hebrews mastered in the fourth century. They were able to keep, even though the Jews were in the diaspora spread all over, they were able to keep them all celebrating together by making that calendar in the right way. And so India is trying to come on, you guys in this little village, like let's, I know that you want to be different for 4 months. Just jump on with us here. So yeah. The dynamics of the calendar are fundamental to how we look at time and how we calculate it. The Vedic calendar comes from watching the cycles of the sun and moon and then expressing the natural cycles in these observations. The stars turning in the year and the lunations are already present. The human mind is just watching them and giving them names. We watch the dance of the sun and the moon, and we see how all the festivals and times of worship are guided by this clock. And when we look deeper, we see that this dance is a movement of consciousness in the sky above and in our own personal experience. So it's and here I'm focused more on you to the sky, but get that this calendar is you to the sky and also the sky to our whole society. And if society is using a sun only calendar, what is the direction that society is going to go? And one of the beautiful things about India right now, and what was it? The other groups that use the solely lunar calendar, get back up here. The Hindus, Buddhists, Tibetans, Chinese, Mongolians, Koreans, and Hebrews. The beautiful thing is all of these people are using the civil calendar based upon Pope Gregor for government related things. All of them are. And all of them are also using this lunar, solely lunar calendar to celebrate their festivities, keeping an attunement with the universe. As a society, as a culture, and there's something really beautiful about that. All right. Um, I'll leave with this screen for my last little bit. So, wow, we did the calendar today. It took a little bit longer than I thought, but we did it. We accomplished. Next week we do seasons. Seasons are really fun. Seasons are really juicy. And literally seasons are juicy. They're emotional. They have tastes and colors and feelings and sensuality to them. So we're going to dig into here we went to this bigger sun moon element. When we do the seasons, we get really into how the human is feeling and experiencing. All right. See you guys next week or whenever I see you next. Namaskar.
Thank you.